This is the first lecture for Chapter 1, The Political Landscape, which accompanies PLS 211, U.S. Government 1. Whenever I start my government classes, I always like to use this analogy of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So let's start off. Here is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Here's another peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And another. And another. On the screen here we have 4 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. If we look at these, you'll notice that they're a little bit different. Some people like their peanut butter and jelly with white bread. Some people like wheat bread. Some people like strawberry. Some people like grape. Some people like creamy peanut butter and others like crunchy. And some people cut them horizontally, some people cut them diagonally, some people cut the crust off, and some people just don't cut them at all. So here we have 4 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, all different, but all peanut butter and jelly. This is kind of like our government. When we're given a set of guidelines, a set of directions on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it might be rather vague. Step 1, take some bread, throw some peanut butter on it, throw some jelly on it. There you go. Those vague steps allow us to interpret what we want our peanut butter and jelly sandwich to be. And that, in many ways, is kind of like our Constitution. It is a set of laws and guidelines as to how we are to run our government. And we have disagreements about how it should be interpreted. And we're going to talk a lot about that this semester. One of the beauties of democracy is that we are able to disagree with one another. We are able to question the government. We are able to disagree with the government. And we don't have to worry about being beheaded or shot or electrocuted or having bamboo shoved up under our fingernails. So please consider that. We are in a nation where we are able to openly debate our government and what its role is. So throughout this semester, I want you to continue thinking about that. What is the role of our government? Okay, so let's get going with Chapter 1. And this is the political landscape. And here we go. The preamble to our Constitution, which I just mentioned, is a statement of principles and goals that the founders thought Americans should live by and live up to. But whether we've done that and how we might better achieve our goals are some of the things that we need to keep in mind as we go through this course. In the early days of the American Republic, the only people allowed to participate in democracy were white landowning men over the age of 25. Therefore, the term "we the people" has changed quite a bit since its original meaning in 1787. The word people now includes virtually the entire adult population, regardless of a race, gender, religion, or socioeconomic status. The only limits that we might place on our democracy are by putting limits on felons, or people who might suffer from severe mental illness. But this is all an example of how our government and our society has changed and continues to evolve in order to form a more perfect union. In order for us to understand where our country's going, we have to look at where we've been. And in this lecture, we're going to look at our government, our politics, and the theoretical roots of American government and explore the characteristics and thoughts of today's Americans. So let's do that. Let's start with the roots of American government. What are they and why are they important? A government is made up of institutions and individuals. Governments make and enforce policies. They conduct the affairs of state. A government has the legitimate right to use force to keep order. A democratic state has a government elected by citizens who have rights and responsibilities. This is different than in an authoritarian regime in which the government rules over the subjects who have no rights. One becomes a member of a democratic community by becoming a citizen. Citizenship can be bestowed in a whole bunch of different ways. In some societies, one becomes a citizen by being born on the territory of the country or via parents who are citizens. Such citizenship is automatic in the United States, and it's known as jus soli, from the Latin meaning right of the soil. You could also choose to be a citizen through a process called naturalization. And in doing so, you learn about a political system and meet some form of its residency requirements, and finally taking an oath. These are usually called territorial-based citizenship policies. Under Bismarck, and until the 1990s, Germany had a different form of citizenship. Citizenship was by blood, or from the Latin jus sanguinis, meaning the right of blood. Your parents had to be ethnically German for you to receive citizenship. There was no method by which a non-German could become a citizen until the late 1990s, when the law on citizenship was changed to allow naturalization. There are other types as well, but these are the poles: citizenship by choice and citizenship by blood. Citizens have responsibilities as active members of a polity. They are expected to obey the laws, vote, pay taxes, and submit to military service if eligible. Citizens also have rights and freedoms. Subjects, though subjected to the rule of the few or the one, have neither rights nor freedoms, and the sole responsibility is to do what they are told. Political science is the study of government and politics. A government is the set of institutions that make rules in the society. A government should have a monopoly on the legitimate use of force in society. If it's not capable of exercising a monopoly on force, a government is considered weak or incapable, and even perhaps illegitimate. Politics are often defined as, quote, the study of who gets what, when, and where, and how, unquote, or as the authoritative allocation of values. Politics is often different under different governments and for countries. For this particular course, we're going to focus on the politics and the government of our country, the United States of America. Now let's look at the functions of our government. The framers of the Constitution set out a democratic system designed to do a few things, including the ability to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. Now, if you look at these 5 things, you might think, they look pretty familiar. And they should. These 5 things are included in the preamble to our Constitution. This is what our framers wanted us to be able to do. This is what they wanted the government to be able to do. Now, of course, as I mentioned with the peanut butter and jelly analogy, we're going to disagree about how to actually do these things. At the types of government. Not all governments have the same functions or goals. There are a number of different types of government, ranging from the rule of one to the rule of many, and varying by who participates, who governs, and how much authority those who govern enjoy. First, let's stick to monarchy. Monarchy is generally defined as the rule of one in the interest of all. The framers rejected monarchical government due to their experience with the English king. The framers also objected aristocracy, which is the rule of the few for the benefit of the many. Tyranny is another form of government that was rejected by the framers. Tyranny is the rule of a single person to benefit no one but the ruler. We also have oligarchy. That's a little better. It's broader than tyranny, but still the rule of a few to benefit only the ruling group. Instead, the framers chose a polity, a rule by many for the public good. The framers disliked democracy because they considered it mob rule, the rule of many in their individual interests, and they preferred a more indirect representative democracy, or a republic, to some ideal of absolute democracy in which many would run all over the rights of the few. Now let's look at the philosophical origins of American government. These guys didn't just come up with it. It was a long time coming. People were thinking about government, since there was a government. So our framers studied those writings and they came up with the ideas we have today. So let's kind of look at where they got these ideas from, starting with the Reformation and the Enlightenment. The Protestant Reformation was based on the idea that individuals should be able to talk to God without going through a priest. This individual empowerment is a major precursor to democracy because Protestantism brought with it the idea of covenants. This idea of self-governing congregation without the need for some formal hierarchy led to the idea that secular matters could also be self-governing. Covenants involved into the idea of the social contract, that people must give their consent to be governed. This is one of the bases of our democracy. We have Hobbes, Locke, and a variety of other Enlightenment philosophers who come up with some of these ideas. Specifically, we're going to look at Hobbes and Locke because they have something which we refer to as the social contract. Both Hobbes and Locke wrote about this social contract idea. However, they took different views about the reasons for the social contract and what life was like prior to the social contract. Thomas Hobbes was a bit of a pessimist, and he believed that it was man's basic state to be one of war. He wanted strong government. He thought it was necessary to restrain man, and men must give up certain rights to a government in order to survive. John Locke, he was a bit different, and his view was that it was our human nature to have a government. Locke argued that men formed governments in order to preserve their property and their justice. If governments failed to do this, the people would have a right to revolt since the government had broken their contract. Both philosophers contributed to the ideas on which the Founding Fathers built our country. Our system tries to strike a balance between those two views of government and human nature. Now here we are at a point where we're devising some type of national government for the colonies. We all know a little bit about American history and how we started out as colonies under the English crown, and somehow or another we decided to form our own country and our own government. Well, at the time of our founding, several forms of government existed. We went over a few of those: monarchy, oligarchy, aristocracy, and more. All of those are based on elite rule and give few rights to the subjects who actually live under them. The colonists didn't want to replicate that under any way because they had suffered from that. They had suffered under the English king, and so they sought to establish a new system, a form of democracy. The first representative assembly in the New World was the Virginia House of Burgesses, which was created in 1619. Interesting note on that is that the House of Burgesses basically still exists here in Virginia, but now it's known as the General Assembly. In addition to the House of Burgesses, New England had established a tradition of direct democracy through the process of holding town meetings, in which many of the colonists would get together and talk about the issues. However, many of the colonists were very hostile towards the British and their forms of taxation because they weren't actually allowed to have representatives in the British House of Commons or in the House of Lords. It seemed obvious that the colonists wanted some form of self-rule, but the traditions of direct democracy and representative democracy evidenced above, stood in conflict. Virginia and other colonies wanted representative democracy, while New England wanted direct democracy. As the colonies got larger, it became fairly obvious that direct democracy would be too cumbersome and time-consuming. So representative democracy, or republic, became the ideal of the government in the colonies. And this concludes Lecture 1. Lecture 2 will pick up with the American political culture and the basic tenets of democracy.